Hello and welcome back. This is MC1 Gamer bringing you a heavyweight contest this time. I have seen a lot of comparisons and conversations about who would beat who, and especially whenever there's a new special character that's introduced or a new book, people start pitting the super uber characters against each other to see who would win, who's the biggest, baddest on the block. And since End Times, it has been heavily talked about. How would Nagash fare? What would you need to kill Nagash? Would it be a bloodthirster, a tooled-out vampire lord, a Skaven warlord with a fell blade? What is it that would take him down? And then the Glocken book came out, and a lot of people were talking about how the Glocken super character would fare against Nagash and against others. But most recently, there's been talk about how Karl Franz Ascended stacks up against everybody. And I got to tell you, he stacks up pretty well. So let's take a look at both of these super characters, these epic characters, and see, if they did clash on the battlefield, which you have to assume that in venues, whether it's in local settings, certainly if people allow it, it's going to happen, if it hasn't happened already. On tournament play and competitive play, certainly it's something that's possibly going to happen, because a lot of tournaments right now are allowing a much more liberal view of end times, testing things out, see how crazy and broken things are, and I guess they'll do some comping down the road if they haven't already. So let's take a look at the stats. Now, Nagash has been described endlessly, and but I'm going to go over the stats just to review. First of all, he comes in at a tremendous amount of points. I'm not even going to bother with the whole Skaven slave thing. You know what? This is a simple YouTube video, and if GW is even watching me and they want to bother me about the fact that I'm actually using real points, fine. Let them request the video get taken down. But at this point, I'm just going to put out the numbers and have a conversation. So Nagash is a swift, clean, lean, efficient 1,000 points. And he's got movement 6, weapon skill 7, ballistic 7, strength 7, toughness 7, 7 wounds, initiative 6, attack 6, and a leadership of 10. Now, we're going to discount, at least for the time being, Nagash's magical abilities. Now, a lot of his points are sunk into magic abilities, at least a 200 or more points. But let's put that aside for now, and we'll talk about that later. The fact is, though, is that he's a large target. He's got terror. He's got the undead rule, which means if he does lose in a combat, he will crumble. But if he has a couple of nice rules that help mitigate some of his misgivings and his weaknesses. When we talk about magic, we could talk about the fact that he has some miscast protection. But one of the nice things that he does have for him and for units around him is that he will, within his general's inspiration radius, which is 12 inches, crumbling suffers only 2 wounds fewer than normal due to the unstable rule. This is a big deal because one of the things that can happen with some of these super characters in the undead, vampire counts, and Tomb Kings individually is if you do wind up losing a combat, especially if it's something like static combat res, because maybe you were in a unit with some fodder like zombies or whatnot, or skeletons, you could wind up losing the combat, and if that happens, you're insulated by the fact that you have a large number of these throwaway models, but once they're gone, you start taking wounds. So the fact that Nagash can mitigate 2 of those wounds right off the bat is a big deal. And we won't use this as an example for this fight, but if he's near a BSB, that's going to be an additional 1. If he's near the Morghasts that provide this, that's going to be further enhanced, which is doubtful. You're not going to really see Morghasts and Nagash unless you're in a really, really big game. But you might see the Morghasts, the Archai, or the Harbingers, which also within a certain range, -1 to subtract 1 from that crumbling So there could be some outside effects, but again, for the purposes of this battle, we're going to look at just the individual stats if they were stacked up against each other. And then we'll talk about some other factors further down. So for just in terms of magical items and actual power, Nagash has a staff that allows him to store dice. Now, we have to assume that there's going to be magic phases where he's going to be able to store dice, especially if he thinks that he's about to get charged by Karl Franz, or if he's about to take the opportunity to charge Karl Franz himself. So it is a potential possibility that he can take and utilize some of those dice in order to use his special ability, which is to take for each die he has stored, he can transfer that. Instead of using it as for Winds of Magic, he can use it instead for one attack for each of those dice that he has. He can turn into a heroic killing blow. So it could be a chance for a heroic killing blow if he rolls it. Now that's pretty severe, because even if you're going up against a unit or a model that has a ward save, the ward save, if it fails, they're dead, and it doesn't make a difference what size model they are. So that's a big deal, and that is a factor, but it's obviously not a given. It's not a guarantee, because Nagash may not have any dice left. He may have needed to use it for other casting, and it's certainly, I doubt that he's going to have 7 dice. It's potentially possible, certainly, for, or rather 6 dice for all of his attacks. But let's assume that he has a few, and there is the possibility that he could get a heroic killing blow off. Let's put that in there, because it is definitely a factor. And again, if you're playing Nagash and you know you're going up against a behemoth like Karl Franz in the close combat phase, if you've got those dice stored, you're probably going to want to use them. So the next thing he's got is he's got a 4-up armor for his magical black armor, and a 4-up ward. Now the 4-up armor is not going to come into play, because both Nagash and Karl Franz, they have the 4-up armors. They have high enough strength that it's just not going to matter that much. What we have is a 4-up ward save. So a 50-50 chance on every time you get wounded that you're going to save. And that's pretty good, especially considering that Nagash is a toughness 7, and he's got a decent amount of wounds. He's got 6 wounds. That's pretty good. Now, some of his other offensive ability, because he's got the 9 books in Nagash, which is nice, but that's something that will happen outside of the close combat. Really, it's not going to affect terribly the combat unless he manages to get some enhancement augmentation spells off. But let's take a look at, again, just the close combat specific stuff that you guaranteed that you have. He has his Mortis Blade, and that provides him with +1 strength. So he's now at strength 8, and each of his attacks that wound will do die 3 wounds. Now that's a big deal. That's a good amount. He's got 6 attacks, strength 8, die 3 wounds. Not bad. So he's definitely got something that he brings to the table. But at 1,000 points, he better. So now let's take a look at the new challenger, because everybody's been talking about Nagash up until Glocken dropped, and everybody started seeing the new Karl Franz after he was killed, and came back as Matiram has dubbed him Shazam. And I think that's pretty apt, because he's got some the flamboyance of his return in the fluff was very Shazam-like. In any case, looking at his specific stats, weapon skill 7 on par with Nagash, ballistic skill, who cares? Strength 6. Now that's a little bit of a detraction, but we'll take a look at that in 1 second, whether or not that matters. Toughness is 5. Certainly less than Nagash. Nagash is a strength 7 and a toughness 7. So Nagash is going to be able, or actually strength 8. Nagash is going to be able to wound Karl Franz much more easily with only a toughness 5. But 9 wounds. That's pretty good. 9 wounds. Nagash is going to need to hit him and get through his saves several times in order to bring down all those 9 wounds in 1 turn, and hope to get off a heroic killing blow in any of those that he's used dice. So that's pretty impressive that Karl Franz on his mount is now a combined profile and an epic 9 wounds. Really big comparison here is Initiative 7, because Nagash is Initiative 6. Karl Franz at Initiative 7 is going to be striking first. The only chance Nagash has to try and jump in and get the first strike is if he potentially has a corpse cart nearby, in which case he can, an augmentation will give him always strikes first. But that's a long shot. You would have to think that it would have to already be in the list, because if you're going to think about summoning something like that, there's a lot of other very much more effective and more reasonable and more efficient and more powerful things that he could have summoned in the span of whatever part of the game took place before this clash occurred. And it's probably not going to happen that this is it has been summoned, a corpse card. So you'd also have to assume that he or another character would have had to have cast something that augmented it and induced the special ability of the corpse card. So it's potentially possible that Nagash could, from outside means, gain an always strikes first, so that he could go and preempt Karl Franz's attacking first with his higher initiative. But this is very unlikely. There's a lot of things that need to happen in order for that to occur. So we should really assume that that's not going to happen, that Karl Franz is going to get a beat on Nagash before Nagash gets to even raise his blade. And that's a very big deal, because Karl Franz has a lot of things that he can bring to the table. Karl Franz has 10 attacks. That's a lot of attacks. All right, so even if half of them hit, and even if half of them wound, he's going to put a pretty big gash in Nagash. And there's another factor that's really big that could bring Nagash down to his knees in a heartbeat. The first one is, well, let's look at some of his stats. Some of the abilities of Karl Franz. He's got terror, so he's not going to be impressed with Nagash. His inspiring presence, 24 inches. Fine, that's great. That's good for the rest of the army. So there's good potential capability for him to send forces aloft, keep them from running in and breaking, and be able to pick and choose from very far away when he wants to get into combat. So Karl Franz pretty much is probably going to be able to dictate, because he can fly as well. Karl Franz is on Deathclaw, and he can pick and choose when this fight happens and when it's most beneficial to him. So he's got a 4+ armor. Not going to happen. It doesn't matter against Nagash, but he's got a 4+ ward, so he's going to be able to have a good chance for a 50-50, ignoring any wounds that get through. But the fact that he can get this first strike with a higher initiative is really compounded by the fact that all his hits wound automatically. All right, there's no armor save. Nagash will get a ward save, but they automatically wound. So 10 attacks, automatic wound. He's got to hit him. He's going to hit him on a 4+. Okay, so because they have the same weapon skill. It doesn't make a difference that Nagash is toughness 7 and Karl Franz is strength 6. His weapon auto wounds. So let's assume that half the hits get through. 5 hits. Let's assume that half of those are wounds, because Nagash, let's see, he's gonna save. Let's say he saves 5 out of out of those 5, 3 out of 5. 2 of them get through. Karl Franz has die 3 wounds +1, not just die 3 +1. Okay, so with 7 wounds for Nagash, there is absolutely the potential, with a good roll, on even an average amount of hits, average amount of wounds that have been unsaved, that Karl Franz could drop Nagash in 1 round. Because if you even roll let's say you roll a 3 and well, you'd have to probably roll 3 twice to get that 8. Well, you need a 7. So you roll die 3 +1, that's 4. Okay? And let's say you roll die 2, next die 3 is, you roll 2. That'll be 3 total. So that's 4 and 3, 7. That's the dead Nagash. So that's a little bit, slightly above average. That's taking into consideration, though, that out of the 5 wounds that you cause, Nagash saves 3 of them. If he saves only 2 of them and 3 get through, I think Karl Franz almost all the time will drop Nagash. And that is a big deal. Karl Franz is a great neutralizer for Nagash. He has some other things that certainly benefit him. He's got magic resistance too. So if Nagash is going to try to soften him up, it's going to be tough. It's going to be hard. You're not going to be doing that with magical spells. He's not going to be very easily spirit leeching him. He's not going to be very easily an Eye of Nagashing him. Let me also say that Karl Franz is a little bit more reasonable in points, 810. So that's just short of 200 points cheaper. And that's probably taking into consideration that Nagash has all that casting ability. So let's talk about the casting ability. Nagash has a lot of options. He doesn't have an option where he's going to be improving his ward save. That's not going to happen. He doesn't have an option that's going to help him too much protective-wise. He does have some options where he could potentially re-roll hits, re-roll wounds, but all of that is after he hopefully survives the onslaught of Karl Franz Ascended. So he would have to survive. That's a big deal. Karl Franz getting that first beat in on Nagash, having the volume of attacks that he has, auto wounding, multiple wounds, basically 2 to 4 per shot that he gets in, is the big factor here. I think it would have to be an awful roll in terms of the hits, and it would have to be a profoundly good phase for Nagash in terms of his defenses rolling in his favor, his ward, in order for him to survive against Karl Franz onslaught. Now, let's take a look a little bit more about Nagash, because Nagash is not just going to walk into a combat with a behemoth, with a bruiser like Karl Franz, without taking in some factors, some effort to reduce or limit what Karl Franz can do. He might augment some of his own spells with rerolls to hit, rerolls to wound, but again, he has to survive in order for that to happen. He could try to cast spells that will have a negative impact on Karl Franz, which is certainly reasonable when you consider that the magic resistance 2 is really only effective against wounding spells that actually will do damage. It's not going to have that magic resistance doesn't have any effect on effect spells, on hexes that will actually do that will reduce his capability to attack. So there's a chance that Nagash could boost himself up a little bit, can maybe mitigate some of Karl Franz's abilities. Could he force him to reroll to hits? Certainly, that's possible. Could outside elements come into play with summoning? With the fact that Nagash is probably not going to be all by his lonesome, even though he's not going to have anything really epic to start with. He's going to have to raise it all, and it's entirely possible that Karl Franz could be up in his face by turn 2 before Nagash could really get anything major summoned. Because you could shut down his initial phase with a Dispel Scroll and the rest of your dice. It's entirely possible. So there, and then maybe Nagash doesn't even have some of these dice saved over for even a counterattack. So here's some of the factors. I've talked for quite a while. Please feel free to weigh in on your scenarios and your thoughts, how you think this fight might go down, what you think you would do if you were playing one or the other, what else you might use in order to try to turn the tide in favor of Nagash. Nagash does have the ability to take spells from death, from light, from the Lord of Nehekara, and from vampires, of course, and from undeath. Would he take maybe and hopefully get some Lord of Lights, some Lore of Light spells that might have an impact? Sure. What would you do if you were Nagash to try and make sure that this doesn't happen? Because the way I see it, unless certain things come with Nagash's casting ability, he's a level 5 wizard, and again, he can roll he can get spells off without being worried about miscasting very much, because he gets to roll one of those re-roll one of those miscast die. He's got to live with the result, but he gets to do that. Some of that could come into play, and that's a strategy that you, as the player, as the person generaling Nagash, would have to think about, knowing that Karl Franz is coming your way. Now, as Karl Franz, you don't have a lot of other options. You have what you have. You're pretty much going to be looking to maneuver the troops and forces you have to put you in a position to do an end run into Nagash, to sack the quarterback. So that's your aim. And once you get in there, you've got plenty going for you. But you don't have to use any kind of elaborate tactics otherwise. Once you get in there, you're going to be just knocking Nagash upside the head with your hammer. And that's fairly effective just based on what your abilities and stats are. So it's really going to be upon Nagash to try and stack the deck in his favor, or try to mitigate some of what Karl Franz brings to the table. Because the way I look at it, and hey, I'm an undead and vampire count player. I'm all about Nagash. But I have a great deal of respect seeing the stats for Karl Franz Ascended. He is kind of like Shazam. He is a absolute god. It's nice to see the humans getting a little bit of pump. I wish it was some more on the Bretonnian side, but I'm happy to see something that is giving them a little bit more versus some of the behemoths that are being released in End Times. So these super godlike characters, they're going to be clashing. I'll do more of these. What do you think? Thanks for weighing in, and if you like this, please feel free to like. Of course, comment, be polite, people, please. Let's be adults. Let's not get into any really superheated conflicts or bad language. And of course, if you want to see more of what I've got going on, I have a number of things happening between campaigns and battle reports and conversion blogs and opinions and analysis and news that breaks that I pick up, and various discussions and responses with my fellow YouTubers. If you like this stuff, please feel free to subscribe, and have a great day.